Hi, Tim.
Hi, Cameron. How are you?
Great. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you giving us probably 20 minutes or so where we're going to talk about the article you've just written about a week or so ago, which is titled The Next Chapter, Navigating Life and Finances After Separation. Mate, what prompted you to put this together?
Oh, good question. I've decided for our podcast sessions, Cameron, I'm going to write some topics that are a little bit left of centre so we get a good discussion going on. So I thought something I've been doing a little bit of lately in our age bracket, being in early 40s now, is unfortunately going through a few of these with people around me. Yeah. So I thought good thing to sort of write about and hopefully give a few pointers to people that may be unfortunately going through this themselves.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, we have had a whole bunch of clients over the course of the last few years that have gone through a separation. Existing clients, and then also we do get a bit of inquiry actually from people that are going through a separation and wondering what that means for their finances. So it's certainly a good topic.
Yeah, absolutely, and unfortunately, it's not going to stop getting that flow of inquiries.
No. What's the divorce rate now?
I think it's 1 in 2.
I feel like that went down, but I remember that it was. Yeah, I remember that was about the number. Yeah. 1 in 2.
Yeah, and they are. I think there used to be a bit of a stigma with it, but now I think it's just so much normal. I should say normalised. One of the quick side note, one of the lawyers I've done some work with over the years, he's got 4 kids, right? And I love going to meetings with him because he just starts with, "I got 4 kids, 2 are getting divorced, so let's now talk about breaks the ice with that sort of thing." And it is unfortunately happening all too often.
Yeah, it does. Anyway, that's how it is.
It is how it is.
In your article, you talked about separation is often as much a financial crisis as it is an emotional one. Yep. Let's unpack that a bit.
Yeah, I guess as a starting point to it, being it's so emotional, it immediately goes to finances because you can sort of quantify the finances. Emotions sort of you get fired up and then you go to, right, what do the dollars and cents look like and how can we split that? And part of the purpose behind writing it was don't delve straight into the finances, just think about some of the other factors that are at play. Particularly a lot of divorces have got kids involved in that. Don't let the emotions and the finances overtake everything else you've got to be aware of. So that was probably part of it behind the scenes. But happy to start with non-financial, financial, whatever element you want to dive into. Let's do it.
Well, we're financial advisors. So
of course we are.
So let's start with finances and
Fair
then
enough.
We'll transition in.
All right, let's do it.
So how does it work?
Yeah.
If we're getting divorced, Tim, is it 50-50? How does it all?
Good question. It often depends on custody of kids, who's taking the kids for the majority of the time and what it looks like, financial positions, incomes, all of that. So I wish I could give you a one-size-fits-all answer to that question, but probably the easiest way to say it is majority of the time it is who's looking after the kids more in the case of situations where there is kids is going to end up with more of the money. But probably I think first one to touch on from a financial angle that is difficult is that in most households, someone is a financial person and someone is not.
Yeah, that's right.
In our households, we're probably the financial people because we're finance nerds day to day.
Yeah.
But that can often be a difficult one, as in some households, if you're not the financial person, you're not over the bills and all those sort of things, you're now in a situation where you got to take care of that responsibility because you're now unfortunately on your own. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And I think that's really challenging on both sides, I think. So, and certainly, Lisa and I recorded a podcast about that, which was released 2 podcasts ago. Yeah. Just about what happens when one person is looking after the finances when life events occur, separation, death,
passing.
Yeah, all those things.
Yeah.
All right. So, thinking about the finances, I think the best way to sort of think about that from a financial perspective is to get a tally of the assets, isn't it? So it's about, and we keep that score, I think. So for our clients, we do. So it's about saying, well, the house is worth X and getting a formal valuation. It's your superannuations are worth Y. You've got this much money in the bank. Your shares are worth X. So sort of try to get to what the total amount is, and then how do people? What happens then?
Yeah, and that's probably the default position. Everyone adds up all the numbers and what they're worth. And that's probably, I think, obviously that's an important part of the decision is what is it worth and what do we end up with. obviously it's far more complicated than that in reality in terms of just making that happen. If there's a house with debt against it, those sort of things, it's not quite as simple as just add it all up, divide it into and go your separate ways. But I think probably some of the things that I was keen to focus on and talk about when I've gone to the purpose of writing this article is that stuff is going to happen. There is going to ultimately be, everything's going to get tallied up. There's going to be a split, and that is what it is from that angle. But a few of the things that I wrote that I think when you're going through these sort of things, that is not going to happen instantly, right? That's going to be a process that could take time. And I don't want to scare people potentially reading the article, listening to this, but, if you've got a house and a mortgage and one person has decided they're going to hang on to said house, they're going to have to go through a refinance process. It's not going to be a smooth and easy ride. It could take time. It could take months. So don't rush to the conclusion of, right, split it up. I'm going to get the money in 2 weeks. So some of the things I think we should be focusing on from a financial angle are, like we spoke about, cash flow is a really important one. And if you have been the person historically managing the finances, then great, you've probably got a pretty good grip over what your household cash flow is. But if you're not, it's a learning curve. What does it actually cost me every week? What does a power bill cost me? What does a shopping cost me? And I'm not trying to make people sound silly, but it's a learning curve to actually understand what it does cost. And some bills come in monthly, some bills come in quarterly. It's getting used to that rhythm and being able to go, right, well, I know the end of the month is a really bad time for bills. I've got to start banking up a bit of cash so that when that lands, I've got the money to pay that rather than getting there and not having the cash to pay that. So I think cash flow is a really important starting point for people going through a separation is, right, until I understand what income comes in and what goes out, decision making is really difficult. So that's probably a key one I'd start with. Yeah,
and it also impacts the next steps too, right? So, if someone's separating, they probably one side generally moves out.
Yeah.
There's rent that now has to be paid.
Unfortunately, what I'm seeing is that can take a bit of time in a lot of instances because it's not quite as easy as just moving out.
But that's right. Well, and that's actually an interesting point too, isn't it? Because it does take a while, and to find a place, the vacancy rate in Australia for rental properties is like 0.3% or something, 0.6%, something
not
really
very
small.
high.
Not very high. So that does take a while, and there's emotional decisions around moving into which place, like the right place. It's going to be the right place for you, and if there's kids, for the kids to come over.
Yep. And look, you must have read my article, Cameron, because the second point was no emotional decision making. If we're talking financially, no emotional decision making. And we know when we're dealing with clients who are in really good mental space, good financial position, they can make rash decisions which are not smart, and where you can look at and go, no, don't do that. You can imagine in a separation where your emotions are heightened, you're under stress, you're under pressure. It's very easy to make a bad financial decision. And probably one of the key ones we see in that space is, and you can understand that you've come from a position where financially you're in a good spot. You've got a plan going forwards about accumulating wealth. That's now been taken away from you in a way, particularly if this wasn't the separation wasn't your decision. You sort of go through that fight or flight response of, I've had all this, I want that back again. I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to have to sell my house. I'm going to buy the next one. So you immediately go back into this, how do I get back what I've got very quickly? And that's where this rash decision making can come into things. And as we know, decisions driven by emotion don't often end well. So part of, I said again in the article, was just slow down, take a bit of a breath, don't go making silly decisions. Houses are probably a pretty good one. If you have to rent for a little bit, so be it. Give yourself time and avoid yourself making those decisions. Yeah, that's right. And the other thing that is always emotional is children. And when the kids come into it, that's challenging, I think. So you talk about in the article thinking about the children. It's probably an obvious answer, but like why? Yeah, sometimes you might want to leave them to the other side, Cam. Just get rid of the kids. It's probably been a few days I've thought, get rid of them. No. I think this is, again, we're finance nerds, but this is a very often overlooked part of the situation when you're dealing with separation, because naturally there's going to be a bit of anger floating around the room. Yeah. But when there's kids involved, you've got to remember that fighting over an extra $5,000 or $10,000 is not worth the hassle at the end of the day long term, versus having a really good relationship with the father or the mother of your child who now sits on the other side of the table to where you are. You think about although you might be separated, there's going to be a lot of interaction with that person over a long, long period of time. It's not worth completely blowing up that relationship for the sake of a little bit of money. It's better to maintain that and be amicable about things going forward. So I think from a non-financial lens, that's probably one piece of advice that's worth giving, given what we see. It's not always worth it to have a fight over a little bit of money. Just sometimes it's be the bigger person and move on and keep that relationship.
It is also understandable that it does happen because it is an emotional time and it's challenging for everyone, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
One of the things that we see, that I've seen a bit, is one member of the couple typically wants to keep the home. You talk about in your article how it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It doesn't have to be the forever home. Should we elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, sure.
I just thought I'd put you back on the spot.
Totally fine. Well, I did ask the question, and I do know my version of the answer.
Well, you go for it, and I'll tell you if I think differently.
So I think what I tend to see is that it really does depend upon the financial position, right? But if we're just going to bring it back to the maths of the money, but let's say the financial position is, I don't know, $5 million net worth, right? And the house is worth $3 million. So and let's keep it simple, and let's say it's 50-50. So therefore, $2.5 million worth of assets has to go to one side and $2.5 million has to go to the other side. If the property is worth $3 million, it's in an illiquid asset. So what that then means for the person that is going to keep the family home, that wants to keep the family home, they are going to have assets worth $3 million, and there will be associated debt of $500,000, and that $500,000 supports the home. But of course, there are now no other assets, are there? So the other assets have then been, if we think about the person who's keeping the family home, the other assets that would have been investments in superannuation have now gone over to the other partner.
Yeah.
And so I understand why people want to keep the family home, because it is where the family is. It's where the kids are. It's where the memories are. It's where the emotion is. But often from a financial perspective, it doesn't often make as much sense because you do need those other assets in life to have choice later on in life. You do need those other assets. And so potentially a downsize is what is then required, because, you're becoming two households instead of one.
Yeah, and that's the big challenge in the situation is you've gone from being a couple, two incomes running a household, to now being two singles running two households with one income each. And yet, point is spot on there. You could end in a spot where you have a house but no other assets, which, all well and good to have a nice house and build up equity in your home. But at the end of the day, you've still got to have an asset base to live off later in life. But probably more of the challenge that you see is you might have a couple with a house worth $1 million, $1.2 million, whatever, and a mortgage. You can't sell $800,000 of asset in terms of equity and go and buy two family homes, because I don't know, I haven't looked around too much, but I don't know where you find too many $400,000 family homes under that example. Yeah. So again, it comes back to the emotional side of it. It is really, that is probably the most difficult part of navigating a separation. From what I'm seeing is it's not easy to go and buy two homes. So someone either has to keep the home and take on a significant amount of debt, and the other person has to rent, or you're selling and you're going back to not ground zero, but back to a deposit type level to make that next decision from. And
just the other comment I'll make on that too is that at that time when you're making that decision, that's a really good time for advice.
Well, that's if you're not seeking advice or you're not bouncing ideas off someone, that's your emotional decision making taking over again and going, I'm just going to do this. And it's like, well, is it necessarily the right thing to be doing?
Yeah, because advice then is going to say, well, let's think about this from a tangible perspective. Let's think about this from a non-emotional perspective. And let's say that you do this. What will be your financial position in 5 years? What will be your financial position in 10 years when you want to retire? Yeah. What will be your financial position in 20 years' time after you've been retired for 10 years? Yeah. And so you can then use the numbers to help formulate an idea as to whether this is a good idea or this is not a good idea.
And look, it's a really difficult one. Like you and I have both got kids, both happily married as far as we both know.
I'm happily married, yes.
I'm more menacing if I asked your wife, would she say the same thing?
I'm sure she would also say she's happily married, but Blaze, maybe if you'll listen.
If you're listening, please just confirm that. No, I'm sorry, I was sidetracked us again there, Cam. It's a difficult time, and I think this is where the house is such a challenging one, because you often then fall into the trap of, oh, I can't afford to live in the same area. I mean, I'm going to go move. I'm going to move further away. I'm going to buy a smaller house. And some of the things I wrote in the article were the most. When you're going through a really difficult time, having people around you who can care for you, can help you, who can be a support network for you is incredibly important.
Yeah.
And if that means you should rent for a period of time to be near those people and be around people when you need support the most, to me, I don't think any Australian wants to be out of the property market, because we've seen growth in property market and the impact being out of a property market can have. But in that short period, whether it be 6 months, a year, 2 years, I'd pretty heavily challenge that the importance of being near people you trust and rely on outweighs the benefit of potentially a little bit of capital growth in the market. Now, argue it either way. It's a fair argument, but I think that can often be overlooked as, I'm just going to go move further away, or I'm going to, I think being near a support worker is a pretty important non-financial part of this equation.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, I think, that you raised, because making the financial decision first before making the life decision. The life decision is always more important than the financial decision. The financial decision should support the life decision, not the other way around.
Yeah, and when we talk about the emotions, we've unfortunately in our line of work get to interact with lawyers a fair bit, and when you see divorces or separations getting ugly and getting messy, we will quite openly say to people, you can pursue this path of arguing and fighting and whatnot. The only people winning around this table at that point in time are the lawyers. Individually, on separate sides, you're not winning. Financial advisors are not benefiting out of it. It's the lawyers that are the ones collecting. At the end of the day, it's coming out of the separation, the marital pool of assets. So very difficult advice to probably take on when you're in the heat of the battle. But from our end, that's certainly a very important part of it as well.
Yeah, and I think being able to understand what you want out of your new life longer term allows you to be able to move past some of those, what would be considered and will feel like large decisions at the moment when you're making those decisions with, your lawyers in both corners. But being able to pull yourself out of that is probably really important, because then, and then again, that's part of what good financial advice can give you, is an informed view.
Yeah, and look, I mean, obviously engaging a financial advisor if you're working one during this time is certainly going to help, but the challenge is if you're not working with a financial advisor, and that's fine. I'm not saying everyone going through a separation needs to engage an advisor. It's also being careful the people you are around, because you can fall into the trap of everyone just wants to say yes and make you feel better, and I want to do this. Oh, that sounds like a great idea. You should definitely do that. Like, be careful who you're getting advice from. It might not be an advisor, but just be careful that it's not people who are just going to say yes to everything, rather than someone who's going to stand up and challenge.
And we were chatting about this prior to coming on air. There are different ways of implementing your separation. Yeah. So there is the traditional, the one you see on Suits, where there's two lawyers in a room and they start yelling at each other, and no one likes each other.
Both wearing pink shirts, like you and I.
Oh, do they wear pink shirts?
I don't reckon they do.
I really like my pink shirt. This is a new one.
I love it. It's a great shirt.
You were telling me this is like 3 years old.
It is. My shirt's a few years old, so you've got me. It might be a little bit more dull than yours.
It's a nice shirt.
I don't know if lawyers wear pink shirts. Anyway,
moving on.
James was enjoying the conversation.
Now I can't remember what I was going to say.
There's a new way of implementing separation.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure. So it's not necessarily the lawyers yelling at each other. You can also go through the process of seeing the same lawyer together, who then helps you both mediate an agreement, and then that ends up being ratified by the court. Yeah. So there is ways of doing it amicably. And so when you were talking about lawyers before, I was thinking that there is also the other way, which is, I guess, what everyone would hope for out of their separation, I guess, is to do it amicably, because in reality, I suppose if you have ties, children, other things together, maybe businesses, something like that you have together, you are going to see each other post the separation. Yeah. So if you can do it amicably, it seems like that's probably the better way to do it.
Yeah. I think from a financial advice lens, that's certainly good advice, because again, lawyers are expensive and they're not getting each. And I'm not saying lawyers, I should clarify that there are situations where lawyers are required. Things have got really ugly and you don't want to be trying to second guess if the decision you're making is the right one. But probably in the majority of cases, I see people make the decision to separate. It's not we're already at war. We've made that decision. We just want to get it done. We don't want to drag it out and take any longer than what it needs to. So yes, if we can get to a situation where it's resolved amicably and we can get one lawyer mediating the outcome, then that is far and away the better outcome for every circumstance. And unfortunately, where it does get messy, I think, and you would see this in your world in terms of people that you know in your personal network, it's pretty obvious from the outside that it's got messy. And if, as adults, we can realise that, I guarantee you the kids are realising that. And kids don't have the same ability to regulate emotions that adults do. So if mum and dad are not in a good spot, it's going to rub off on them pretty quick.
I'm sure.
And again, I think that's coming back to the point of, if it's going to cost you 5 or 10 grand, and it's a large number, I'm not saying that's not a large number, but you can move on with your life. In 3 years' time, you'll probably look back on that and go, "That was definitely the best." decision.
It was a good outcome.
And happy if you disagree, go for it. But I sort of think that's
No, you don't like to see anyone quibble over
Yeah.
what is, I'm sure, very important at the time. But if you have, this is what I was saying before, if you have context
Yeah.
for your life, that's kind of that allows people to be able to move through those what would be feeling like big decisions at the time.
Yeah.
Mate, is there anything else we haven't covered that was in the article that you want to sort of highlight?
No, look, I think we've gone through most of it, but probably just touching on a few of them is just advice off someone. And I don't think a financial advisor would be great, but if it's not a financial advisor, it's someone in your network who is not necessarily your best friend, who is just going to, yep, do it, a great idea sort of thing. Someone that's probably going to take a step back and look at it pragmatically, and also be willing to give you the open feedback, I think is something that would be very important when you're going through this stressful time. Looking out for yourself, looking out for your kids, having a support network around you that can guide you through this, because we're naturally talking financially. There's far more to it than just the finances. Is as a person holding it together and getting through that in the best shape you can. And I think probably if I was to give you a closing point, it's a very stressful time, and it's not the end. It's actually the start. It's getting through this is one part of your life that it hasn't worked out. So be it. It happens to 1 in 2 marriages now, like we spoke about at the start. Life starts again. And if you can get to that point in a good state and know what your position looks like, manage your cash flow, make smart decisions, all of those sort of things from there. There's a point in the article I'll let people read about, making small smart decisions over a long period of time can lead to really good outcomes, worth having a read of.
Yeah.
I think looking forwards rather than looking backwards in anger, look forwards with positiveness. That's probably the best.
That's really a good way
wrap
to
up
sum
that
up.
I can give you.
That's really a good way to sum up. So, look, thanks for spending some time writing this article. I'm sure people that read it will get something out of it. Thanks for the 20 minutes you've spent with me now. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to be.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Cheers.